Hello, this is Dav Edward. I'm one of the players on Tsargoth's Will It Craft server. You may have seen me popping in and out a couple times on his videos. You've seen me previously as a little pink dragon. This is my normal skin. I'm very poor at being on the microphone, but I'll do my best here. I tend to stammer when I realize that I'm being recorded. I tend to like to make all sorts of automations and contraptions. I'm usually the one that likes to make ridiculous machines. I was once known for a little while as the person who made the fastest world-nomming machine that I have on YouTube. Unfortunately, none of my recordings were ever very good, but the machine still worked. In any case, I'm going to switch over to first person here, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm making a little secret project for Tsar. I had a previous recording of me putting it together at first, but the recording utterly fell apart. I realized that the recording I was making was such bad quality that when viewing it on YouTube, I couldn't even see what I was doing, and I knew what I was looking at. So this is my attempt again. I'm using DxTory to make this recording. I had a little bit of fighting trying to get the audio tracks to work, but now that I do, here we go. So first of all, I hid my base way out here, pretty much in plain sight. Tsar's been kind enough not to get too curious and peek in here. So I was trying to think of what I could do to make Tsar a happy dragon. He likes to all sorts of things, but one that we usually like to tease him about is him being a waffle dragon. He really likes his waffles, and he also likes his coffee. So I came up with a clever little machine that'll probably amuse him at least for a while. This monstrosity is what I've been working on this entire time. The first part's fairly straightforward to anybody that's really experienced with lots of mods, but nonetheless I'll try my best to break it down so that people can see what this mess is and what it's doing. And then over here, that's my grand prize work there, which I've been spending the better part of almost 3 weeks working on and off whenever I had free time. First things first, let's start with the basic stuff. This right here is an automated farm. I'm going to shrink down to bat form just so I can get under there and show. Okay, pixie form then. There we go. So what I have going on down here is I have a mine factory loaded planter. It's set to simply just try and put seeds up above. I just blocked off all the extra slots just so it wouldn't keep filling with seeds forever. It's being powered right now by 3 heat generators side by side. Oh, sorry, just 2 heat generators now. I stole one for something else. The heat generators are also powering the energized smelter. It's basically an electric furnace. And also up here, the harvester. So the planter is going to keep planting seeds. The harvester is going to come along and keep harvesting all this wheat. I've also planted coffee beans here as well. Whenever the harvester picks up anything, it tries to stick it into this pipe. And the way it's set up is wheat is allowed to go over here. All of the coffee beans go down here, and when coffee beans get smelted, they become, well, hot coffee. The seeds end up going down this pipe and try to go into the planter first, and failing that, they'll go into the trash can, which just gets them deleted. You can see this red marking here on the pipe. That is set for dense mode. What dense mode means is whenever items are traveling through a pipe, they will try the dense piece of pipe last. So it'll try to go absolutely everywhere else first. What's stopping these items from going to the wrong places is I stuck on things called pneumatic servos. When you stick one onto the cuff ends of these pipes, it lets you set filters and all sorts of other neat little options. On the receiving end here, it's just plain old empty. That way it'll just take anything that the machine pushes out. On this end, it's only allowing the coffee beans. On this cuff, it's only allowing wheat. And on that cuff, it's only allowing, if I can just reach a little closer. Gee, it seems I sometimes can only go under here whenever... Now I can't get underneath. Okay, well anyway, that last cuff is only allowing seeds. I just can't reach it. You can see this cable right here. This is basic universal cable. I love this stuff. What it does is it automatically converts from one type of power to a different type of power. It's absolutely useful when you're going back and forth between several different mods like I do all the time. Because these are mechanism generators. This is a mechanism smelter, but those are mine factory loaded harvester and planter, and originally they were designed to accept only buildcraft power, I think. They've expanded to accept RF and a couple others, but nonetheless this makes sure that they work with everything. Over here is just simply what's called a Jabba barrel. It's much like the factorization barrels, except they're much more upgradable and flexible. I like the fact that you can push items in from any side and pull them out from any side. That's the most important piece for me, but they are also upgradable and have all sorts of neat things. The only upgrade that this guy has is just, I think, double the capacity. What's happening here is I have what's called a transfer node. What transfer nodes do is they just quite simply pull items out of an inventory and try to push them into an adjacent inventory. So it's going along this transfer pipe here. Oh, a little bit of lag there. So it's pulling these cups of coffee out. It goes into this item pipe here. This is what's called a rationing pipe. I'll get to that in a second. And on this end is the waffles, and same thing, this guy's pulling out waffles. So since both these pull out, never push in, the only place they can go is the ender chest. This rationing pipe is designed so that it'll only fill one slot of an inventory with this given particular item. So only one slot will have coffee, only one slot will have waffles. So if I peek inside, there's the waffles, there's the coffee. If I take any out, it'll quite happily try to fill it up right away, but it won't start filling into the other slots. All the stuff down here is just junk that I've been kind of putting there because I'm a little lazy. Back to the main production here. So the wheat is being sent all the way along here into what's called an automatic crafting table. This is from Imbius Core, and I absolutely adore this thing. From Imbius, it's part of his mod called Tube Stuff. I've loved this mod ever since the early days of TechIt, and I'm still using it today. The way the automatic crafting table works is you can push items in from any side. Depending on what side they travel in, they'll go into one of these rows. And then you can set up the crafting table spot here. It'll craft whatever you set, and the results will come out at the top of the table. So I'm putting in wheat. This is what's called a mortar and pestle from Pam's Harvestcraft. It's kind of like a bucket, it's reusable. You can just keep using the same one over and over and over again. So it just keeps reusing the same mortar and pestle, and it makes flour. I better change back to normal form because those fairy effects are probably getting on people's nerves. So whenever this makes flour, it goes along here into this crafting table, which is going to be my last one. Over here I have chickens laying eggs. I'm just going to hop down here with them. This is what's called a vacuum hopper. Vacuum hoppers just quite simply pull in any items that are nearby and try to stick them into whatever inventory they're attached to. So again, a Jabba barrel. This particular Jabba barrel, I installed the Void upgrade, I think it's called. All it quite simply does is, if the barrel is utterly full, it'll still take items in, but it'll just delete the extra items. I did that just so all these chickens don't lay eggs like crazy and fill the area up. So same thing as before, I got this thing here set to try and pull eggs out. The redstone control is set to nothing, so it'll pull regardless, and try to stick them in here. So again, back to my center one. Over here I have two computer craft turtles. They're both running a very basic program, and they are in a permanent loop where they'll just keep trying over and over and over again. So I named one Water Boy because he fetches water, and the other one's Milkmaid because it fetches milk. I'm going to actually open up this guy just so you can see what it's doing here. So, while true do, that means forever keep doing the same loop over and over and over again. Turtle select 1, it's picking the first inventory slot. If turtle.getItemCount1, meaning the first slot, is greater than 0, meaning if there's anything in the slot, then print that it's getting water. It uses the place command, and when a turtle tries to place a bucket, instead of placing the bucket, it uses the bucket, so it's going to grab the water in front of it. Then I tell it turtle transfer to slot 2. The reason for this is that way when the loop completes again, when it checks the first slot, it won't see the filled bucket and try to use it again. And then sleep for 15 seconds. Otherwise, if it can't find anything in the first slot, it just says it doesn't need water and sleeps longer. And then what's happening from there is I have these item ducts from before. The one below, which I don't think I can get to very easily. Oh wait, never mind, that was just pushing. So the one on the top here pulls out full water buckets. So regardless of what slot it's in, the pipe's going to see that there's a water bucket in the turtle and yank it out. And it's putting it into the automatic crafting table. When it gets into the automatic crafting table, if you just craft a water bucket, plain and simple, you're given 2 fresh water from Pam's Harvest Craft. When the bucket is empty, because this pipe is attached to the bottom of the automatic crafting table, it'll pull ingredients back out, which is the empty bucket, and it'll just simply push it along and stick it back into the turtle, and since the first inventory slot is empty, it naturally goes to the first inventory slot, and the turtle repeats its job again. So I'll just start that guy back up. I set the program to start up, so the moment the turtle turns on, it starts running. The exact same thing is done over here. I just simply replaced water with the word milk. And the same deal is kind of happening here. This turtle keeps trying to use a bucket. There's a cow in front of it. When you use a bucket on a cow, you get milk. So this guy's getting milk. And same thing, if you craft a milk bucket, you get 1 fresh milk. And then same thing, it sends the empty bucket over, back into the turtle. So you might be wondering what I'm doing with water. The water gives me the fresh water, and if you craft fresh water with a pot, again, the pot is a reusable item, it gives you salt, which is important for what I'm making here. Over here, the milk that I'm getting from the cow is both going into this guy, which is combining fresh milk with a mixing bowl to make me heavy cream, and sending the extra milk all the way over here to my last crafting table again, which I'll get back to in a moment. So I got my salt and my heavy cream. Those both come into the pipes together and try to arrive here. So there's my salt and there's my heavy cream. And as long as it's got both those 2 ingredients, it'll start making butter. And then, so all together here, I've got eggs, butter, wheat, and milk. So all those come together right here. So eggs, which are currently empty at the moment because the chickens aren't fast enough, milk, flour, butter, and a skillet, again it's a reusable item, results in waffles. The waffle gets made, gets pulled out of the top, comes along here, and gets deposited into my waffle barrel. Took me a little bit to figure this out. I've actually took this apart and put it back together again 2 or 3 times. I tend to not be a very skillful builder. I try to plan ahead, but as things are, I always fail at my original plan and usually end up at revision 24 or so before something works the way I wanted it to. Oh, I almost neglected to explain what this is over here. I have an ender tank elsewhere that's always being filled with water, so I can just place an ender tank anywhere I want. If you have an ender tank next to any kind of block that accepts water, if you spin around this little dial on the front, which you can almost see, what it'll do is it'll force eject its water into nearby inventories. In this case, it's pushing it out into an open blocks water tank. And then I stuck a sprinkler from open blocks on top of it. The open block sprinkler is capable of pulling water out of tanks that it's attached to, so it's spraying the water around. And what the sprinkler does is it works very similar to the watering can you saw Tsar talking about earlier in the other episodes. It just makes crops nearby grow a little bit faster, and since it's absolutely free, I may as well stick it on there. It just makes my wheat grow just that little bit faster. I can stick bone meal into the sprinkler to make it go even faster, but that's a little overkill. I'm actually trying to open the inventory, but I think I'm suffering a tiny bit of lag here. Oh, yeah, there we go. So I can put bone meal in there and it'll go faster if I wanted to. So this big piece here has gotten me the coffee and the waffles, and I could just give them to Tsar normally, but that's not fun. That's handy for him, but I want to tease him a little bit. So that's why they were being pushed into this ender chest here. Ender chests are great for trying to make small contraptions where you don't want to have to stick this giant machine in Tsar's base, because he would not like that. So now it's all being shoved into one small little chest that I can put anywhere. I've put it over here. This is going to be my mock-up of what I'm going to be hiding in Tsar's base. So I have the yellow ender chest here. It's colored yellow, yellow, brown for Tsar. I put diamond shards on the locks so that they're my private chests, so that nobody accidentally discovers my chests, because only me can make them. I have an item node again. This one's set to only pull coffee out, and it sticks it into the coffee bot here. And for the waffle bot I made a little bit smarter. It's using open peripherals, which is a mod that allows you to make almost anything a peripheral, which in terms of computer craft means it's a component that you can stick to next to a turtle or a computer. In this case, because the turtle is touching the ender chest is considered a peripheral to the turtle, and it gives me all sorts of useful functions, like being able to see what's in the chest, how many, what type it is, all sorts of useful functions. In my case, the only ones I care about is what is an inventory slot, is it a waffle, and how many are there. After trying to come up with all sorts of crazy ways of giving the waffles and the coffee to Tsar, I originally thought of it throwing them at Tsar, which was amusing, but the problem was if Tsar really, really doesn't want to keep holding these items in his inventory, it's going to get annoying because it's going to keep spraying them all over the place, and I've been known to crash the server by spilling items, and I've been trying my best to not repeat that this time around. So I've been trying my best to have a system in which items are never free-floating, meaning they're never laying around like that. That's actually one reason why I made this hopper over here, the vacuum hopper with the void barrel on it, is no matter how many eggs these chickens lay, it'll never spill out into the ground because the hopper will destroy any extras. So over here, what I've been trying to figure out was, originally the plan was I was going to have a little dropper, try and just drop the items onto the tables. And I tried all sorts of things. I tried dropping them using a turtle, but the problem is when turtles drop items, they tend to be thrown slightly in a random direction, so I could never get them to land on the turtle, or on the table. They would land on the table and slide off, or they'd get thrown across the room. It was very random. It's almost as random as me hovering in the air and going like this. It's never going to all land in the same place. So I tried then using a Minecraft dropper, which is this guy. But the problem with this guy is it likes to throw a distance. It doesn't like to drop straight down, as opposed to its name. It likes to throw them forward. So that didn't work for me. And that was a disappointment. What these three blocks are, these are my other shameful blocks here. The automatic crafting tables from Impious Core I absolutely adore, just because they have that built-in buffer protection. If I put a different item on different sides, so the milk, the butter, the eggs, and the wheat, there's no way for these to get overflown because each of these rows represents each of the sides. If I have too much butter, nothing's going to happen because butter's full. It won't go anywhere else. On other crafting table types, if, say, I had a ton of butter but not enough milk, the entire inventory would fill with butter, and then there's no space for the milk to get in, so I can't craft my result, and the machine gets blocked. I absolutely hate it when my automations jam, so I try to make non-jamming ones. The problem is I tried using the auto workbench, and I was originally going to just simply put a chest next to it. And the way the auto workbench works is this is from Buildcraft, and you can either pipe the items in directly, but if you do so, they must be in the right amounts, otherwise it jams. And also, you can pipe them in by piping them into a chest next to it, and it'll grab from the chest. And I could have used things like that distribution pipe to stop the chest from overflowing. The problem was, auto workbenches don't like reusable items. If I gave it an empty water bucket or the skillet or stuff like that, it jammed. It wouldn't take it. I couldn't even put it in. It let me put a bucket in because it's giving me the iron scrap recipe, but if I tried to do things like make the butter, it won't go. So that was a failure. I then tried the logistics crafting table, which was a perfect solution because every single one of these slots creates a ghost slot. So if I put a recipe in, like so, see how there's little ghosts here? It stops any items other than things that belong in the recipe from getting in. So I can't put the wrong item in the wrong space. It just won't let me. Well, I guess it will while I'm doing it as a user, but it won't get piped in the wrong spots. The only problem with this guy is it requires power and only crafts if you have logistics pipes attached to it. I tried this a little bit in a single player world and was heavily disappointed because although logistics pipes are awesome, I don't know how to use them, and I already had all this stuff set up and really didn't want to start all over again and also try to figure out a power system. Last but not least, this is the one from Thermal Expansion. This is the cyclic assembler. It would do the job, only it was a lot more difficult to build. I'd have to make a bunch of them. They all require power, and they don't have buffer protection. This thing will quite happily fill its entire inventory all with one item, which does me no good. Again, I could use the distribution pipes, but I'm just asking for too much trouble here. So when Tsar installed the Imbius Core Tube Stuff mod, I was ecstatic because it's simple, it works well, and I like the fact that I don't need to keep giving it power. Anyways, going back, so after trying all sorts of ridiculous things on how to deliver the items and adamant about trying to find a way to not have items free floating, I discovered, thanks to Talon, that these tables from Bibliocraft are really clever. They're actually inventories, which most of the time won't spill their guts. They won't tell you that they're an inventory unless you click them in just the right way. There we go. And it only accepts one item. Exactly what I want. I only want to put one item in them. Whenever an item is put in them, so like say that, it floats on the table. This plate is actually a separate block, the dinner plates from Bibliocraft, and they actually accept three different items. So say I did redstone. Oh yeah. This thing's pretty clever and often won't let you put inappropriate items in the slots too, which is just as well. But you can have three different things on the plate. However, Bibliocraft is smart in if you have a plate on a table, the table renders its items on top of the plate. So if I want to put anything on top of the table, Tsar just walks over, right-clicks on the table, and the item pops into his inventory. That way there's no muss, no fuss. If he doesn't want to pick up the item, he doesn't have to. It just sits there on the table, and I've set the computers up so that if they see that there's something already on the table, they just leave it alone. They don't bother putting anything new on the table. That way I can have all the coffee right there, and all the waffles right there, and all's good. I wrote a heaping amount of code to allow these turtles to be very clever in figuring out things. Like, if a turtle tries to deploy an item up, in the case of the waffles, it's supposed to be pushing 5 waffles up so that the player and the table combined have at least 5. If it finds that something that is not a waffle is on the table, like if I do that, it's clever enough to realize that it can't do it. It'll actually tell the computer that there's a problem, and then when the table is unjammed, it'll then try again. I would love to share my code with what I've wrote on this thing, but between my primary program, the waffle bots, and the sensors, which I'll get to in a moment, my code was well over 300 lines long, and that's without the actual conversational part of the program. It was also really complicated. I got a lot of help from Talon in several places where I just needed a sanity check because I would write code that didn't make sense to the computer, and I got some pretty funny results. And also I got a lot of help from, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name right, Talaris. He helped me by rewriting the slow print script. What slow print does, let me see if I can hijack a turtle here. I need a turtle to hijack. I'll just hijack the computer. There's a program called slowprint, which I believe is textutil.slowprint. Of course, I don't remember the original name of the program, which is no good. Ah, there we go. I made a typo somewhere. Oh, yep, I made a typo. So what textutils does is quite simply whatever you give it, like say I wanted to slow this guy down a little bit more, it'll slowly type it out, which looks a lot nicer on computer screens rather than just text flashing on the screen. The only problem is it doesn't have word wrap for some reason. It doesn't work right. What would happen is the text would appear on the screen, and say it hit the edge of the screen while trying to type the word everybody. It got to EVER and then ran out of space. There's a glitch going on in ComputerCraft where if it encounters that problem, it would then go to the next line and retype the entire word again. So for everybody, I get EVER, next line, everybody, which looked absolutely hideous when I was trying to type any long sort of sentences. Luckily for me, Talaris is a good programmer, and what he did was he wrote a custom slowprint program so that I could get this guy working again. I'm very grateful for it because it allowed me to get this program to work. I was resorting to having to count the number of letters in each of my sentences and manually breaking those sentences, and it was quite terrible. So, huge kudos to him for that. So, what I'm dying to show everybody is the program itself in action. If all things go right, this video is probably going to be posted after Tsar discovers it on his main video series, because I kind of want the surprise to be there for the audience as well. But I'll show you guys this thing in action. So normally this thing is always on. I've disabled it just so it doesn't drive me crazy. Oh, and just before I start, I actually should explain what these little guys are. I've made 3 sensor bots, WAF scan 1, 2, and 3. What these little guys do is they all have a block attached to them called, just quite simply, sensor. It's from, I think, OpenBlocks. Easy way to find out. And I typoed again. Again. There we go. I knew eventually I'd spell it right. Here we go. Sensors from Open Peripheral Add-ons. The sensor block is really handy. It allows computers to see way more than I ever thought a computer could. It can see players, entities, mobs, blocks, all sorts of things. It can tell the number of items in players' inventories, so the sensor could actually run through my inventory, see what I have on me, and evaluate it in the various circumstances based on that. It can tell various player effects, like if I'm on fire, if I'm hungry, my health, all sorts of interesting things. So what I've done with these guys is I've put 3 of them together because by default the server only allows the sensors to see 5 block radius, which sounds like a lot until you think about that here the computer wouldn't see me, here the computer wouldn't see me, here where the computer wouldn't see me. So if I want to have this big guy be able to track Tsar on the majority of his top floor, it's not going to do any good. So what I've done is I'm going to have 3 of these guys work together. So I'm going to put back the sensor, otherwise later on I'm going to be confused. There we go, got my sensor back on. When the sensor is attached to a turtle, the turtle itself is a sensor. It can see anything it wants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just simply bury 3 of these guys under the floor, and the moment the server starts up, they just automatically start running and they will evaluate what they see. So if I reboot this guy, this is what it's doing, is it's tracking me, it sees the number of waffles I have, and it sees my food level. And the way it's seeing the waffles on me, by the way, is it scans through my entire inventory until it encounters a slot that has waffles, and then it checks a subtable of what that item has, and that in that subtable, it includes the number of the item, what the item is called, and all sorts of little trinkets. What these guys do is, these guys will repeatedly ping their information using RedNet to the master computer, who also has a wireless modem. And the way I've had it set up is all three of these computers can ping at random speeds. It doesn't really matter, because all the computer cares about is hearing from one of them. The moment it hears from one of them, it stops listening, processes whatever it needs to do appropriately, and then whenever it's done, it goes back into listen mode and just waits for one of them to talk. The only time these turtles talk is if they see the player. If the player is out of their range, they stop talking. With all of that, I'll show off what this guy does finally. So at the moment I have no waffles in my inventory, so it'll be ever so happy to give me some. And every morning at 6 to 7 a.m., which is a Minecraft morning, that's when you wake up out of bed, if it sees that there isn't already coffee on the table, it'll happily tell me good morning and give me coffee. Right now it's set to track me just so I can test it, but later on it's going to be set so it only tracks Tsar, which will be amusing because I want to just adore talking to him. I'm going to reboot my guy here and show off what this guy does. I might have flown away fast enough. Yep, there we go. So it'll just sit like this forever, whether or not the world is chunk loaded. Oh, speaking of which, that's a chunk loader. I'm hoping Tsar showed one of these off by now. Chunk loaders just keep the world loaded, no matter whether or not players are around, so everything within this giant red box that you can't even see the edges of is chunk loaded. It's always running whether or not I'm in the room. But what's happening is that computer set, it's not going to do a single thing until it sees Tsar, or in the case of right now, me. So I'm going to get within the 5 blocks of this turtle so it can see me. I deliberately gave it a long delay just in case. Yep, there we go. And here he goes. This is just a cute little boot up script I made just to amuse Tsar so that he has something to stare at for a couple seconds while figuring out what I did to his base. I think he'd laugh at that screen right there. And yes, I couldn't think of anything more clever than me calling it waffles. This is a play from Red Dwarf from the Talkie Toaster when it's rebuilt. It has a screen very similar to this. I've put it there just to see whether or not Tsar got the reference, because he loves the Talkie Toaster. Believe it or not, it took me 4 hours to ASCII art that waffle. Oh, I'm gonna have to fix that. That online isn't supposed to be on a new line. I'll fix that in a bit. Every time I run this, I always find something teeny and tiny that I gotta fix. Here we go. So it's noticed that I have no waffles now, and it's going to do its thing here. There we go. So that may not have been visible. I should have probably been a little bit higher up, but a waffle appeared on the table. By the way, I should make it clear that right here underneath, these blocks are going to be under the floor. So where you see the gray there is going to be where the floor would be. So the monitor is going to be deliberately one block above the floor, and the computer on top is going to be hidden in the ceiling. Just to show off the error control here, I'm going to quickly grab these waffles and swap it with a block. There, so now that I have something in the way of that cobblestone, at the moment it doesn't care because it sees that I have the 5 waffles on me. As long as there is a grand total of 5 waffles either in my inventory or on the table, it's happy. So I'm going to just deliberately toss these aside and show you what happens when it tries to deploy waffles when it can't. I deliberately slowing down the sensors, but it shouldn't be this slow. Yeah, that thing is running. I believe I found a bug. It was working earlier. Such is the life with programming. There's always going to be something wrong. Oh, yeah. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. Oh, okay. Minor exploit. The blocks I put down, I didn't just put down a block of cobblestone, I put down more than 5 blocks of cobblestone. I could have the turtle check to see whether or not the item on the table is actually waffles. However, I've found that if I do that kind of check, it might just be more problems than it's worth. Like, say, somehow I run out of supply of waffles here. I don't want it to keep nagging Tsar to death about not having enough waffles. So let's try that again with only 1 cobblestone blocking it. There we go. And now I'll throw them aside. By the way, the trivia is random. It happens every 5 minutes as long as the player stays within the room within 5-minute spans. There we go. So it's ever so happy to give me some waffles, but in a moment it's going to not be able to. There we go. So it throws up that error message. If I take away the jam, I thought that Tsar would think that's funny. There's a jam, but not the kind that goes on waffles. If I free that jam, the turtle will keep trying, and eventually it'll realize that it can do it again. There we go. And now that it successfully did so, it's going to tell the computer, hey, you can resume. And there he goes. Now, it did announce that it's going to give me more waffles. What happened is when the jam clears, for that brief moment, there is no waffles on the table, nor in the player's inventory, so it thinks it can do waffles again, and tries to deploy. I could have fixed the bug, but honestly, I decided to just leave it there, because since it has to redeploy the waffles anyways, I may as well let the computer do a waffle caption of some sort. The coffee one I won't be able to deliberately pull off because, honestly, I have to wait for the server to truly become daytime. But basically, same deal with that one is, this one's more passive, it won't throw an error to the computer. As long as there's something on the table, it doesn't care what it is, as long as there's something there. If there isn't something there, it's happy to put a single cup of coffee on it, and never has more than 1 cup of coffee there. I've added all sorts of random little things that it'll say. I added all sorts of different criteria that I'm going to leave for Tsar to figure out. I know he can probably paw through my source code and figure it out because I've tried to leave cues, but I'm pretty sure Tsar will like to take the adventurous approach by just letting it run and see what it does on its own. I've written a large handful of things it can say based on the different circumstances, and I plan to add a whole bunch more, but for the time being I wanted to give him something this week because, well, I've been doing this for 3 weeks, and other than him hearing little bits and pieces when I forget he's around, I've not given him very much to work with as to what I've been doing this entire time. Besides that, I think that's pretty much the whole thing worth explaining. I might be able to do a follow-up episode later on as to me sneaking into his base and building. It's going to be a little interesting challenge for me to get into his base because I'm only home usually when Tsar is, and this means that I can't beat him to the chase here. I can't get on the server before he does, set it up and wait for him. And although I tend to stay up a little bit later than him, I don't want to set it up overnight and then have him have the whole surprise and everything in the morning before I come around, and then me miss out on seeing his reaction. So if things work out well, I'll see if I get a lucky moment where I can put it together maybe while he's on the server, but not at his base. Try to quickly put it together as fast as I can, and then call him over. And if I'm lucky, I'll be on air and do a recording of it. If not, at least you'll see Tsar's end of the recording, and hopefully he'll be doing an episode at the time that I do this. In any case, cheers everybody, and hopefully this will be worth the time. I think this will rather please him. Ta-ta for now.